Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Allison Shapira joining us. Allison is an adjunct lecturer in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and is a trusted advisor behind some of the world's most influential voices. For over 20 years, she's helped senior executives, from prime ministers and cabinet members to Fortune 100 leaders, lead with clarity, confidence, and strategic purpose. So the main topic today is going to be communication. Yay! So, Allison, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy. What a treat to be with you.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today. At the end of the show, we're going to realize that we're both musicians and talk about that intersection. But for now, give our listeners the elevator pitch version of your story.
Growing up, all I wanted to do was be an opera singer. And I went to performing arts high school and college, and then realized it wasn't what I was passionate about. And I also got some feedback that I might not be cut out for a professional singing career. So I wound up in diplomacy, where I had to write and deliver speeches. And I knew nothing about public speaking, but I soon learned that training to be an opera singer actually positioned me very well to be not just a great speaker, but also a great coach of other speakers. And now, over 20 years later, I help senior executives build trust and influence through the way they communicate, including how they communicate using AI, which is the subject of my new book. And I know we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, we're going to open up the opera singer thing a little bit later. But if you had to pick one event in your life that was just a real accelerant for your career, what would that moment be?
About, 13 years ago, I had a defining moment in my life. I was teaching communication skills, but it was on the side, and I was always afraid of taking it full time until one pivotal summer. I was actually offered a job at a prestigious consulting firm in Washington, D.C., and I was living in Boston at the time. And I accepted the job. It would have doubled my salary and given me financial independence for the first time in my life. I flew to DC to sign the contract and wound up having a very visceral, negative reaction to that job. And I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to entering a new professional environment and just feeling like something was off, something wasn't right. And on the end of the third day in that job, not as a prospective new hire, but as part of the leadership team, I realized just because there's a leadership challenge here doesn't mean it has to be my leadership challenge. And so on the third day, I quit and then decided to start my own business, moving to DC, launching this company full time, and it has taken off ever since.
That's very inspiring. Thank you for that. And it's fantastic that you had that realization early on, because a lot of listeners can connect with how stuck we feel when we've made that commitment and we have that realization, but sometimes we spend months, even years in those roles where we really don't fit. So thank you for that inspiration, possibly for some listeners to take a turn. So, Allison, let's start with your first book. You're an accomplished author. In addition to an accomplished public speaker, your first book, Speak with Impact. If a reader could only take one thing away from that book, what would you want that message to be?
I want people to take away from the book that public speaking is a skill and not a talent, and it's something that happens every single day. With the right mindset and process, you can be a powerful public speaker, and it will be an accelerant to your career.
Yeah, so glossophobia, I believe it is, which is the fear of public speaking, some would rather swim with sharks than than speak in public. Tell us a little bit more about that. We're going to talk more about that skill, but how would the average listener who's like, no way, no how, I'm not going to work on that. What's maybe a first step that they can take?
The first step to take in becoming a more confident and less fearful public speaker is to change your mindset, because so often we think when we get up and speak, whether it's at an all hands meeting or even at a client presentation, we think we're the center of attention. And actually, we're not. Your message is the center of attention. The people you represent are the center of attention. And once you realize that, that mindset shift builds your confidence, and you take this extraordinary step. My colleague Dave Bricker coined it so well. He said, you go from nervous to service. And that's what I want people to remember. If they're afraid of public speaking, it's not about you. You're not the center of attention. Your message is the center of attention.
Yeah, our egos and our subconscious bias put us as the center of attention. So it's a wonderful, wonderful mindset shift. Let's talk about your new book. That's going to be our primary focus today, AI for the Authentic Leader. Take us into what compelled you to put pen to paper, at least metaphorically, and what's the, the fingers to the keyboard, and what's the primary challenge that you're trying to solve?
I've been studying artificial intelligence for nearly 8 years, since app developers started coming to me to test their public speaking apps. And I saw how they were using AI to help people reduce their filler words or keep track of their pacing and pausing. When generative AI came out, I realized there was the potential to go deeper. And I had this thought: what if generative AI could actually make you more authentic, not less? And I wrote this book not because my executive clients were asking me about AI, but because not enough of them were asking me about AI. They would say, oh, the tech team is working on it. And I'd say, no, you need to understand as an individual leader how to harness these tools so that you can more effectively guide your organization through this coming transition that we're going through in the workforce. And the immediate challenge, which is why I'm so happy the book is out right now, the immediate challenge is that all of these large enterprises are rolling out AI tools and AI initiatives, but their employees and their leaders don't understand how to use these tools in a way that brings out their authenticity. And I call it the trust gap, because there's new research coming out that shows when you over-rely on AI to communicate a message, your subordinates can see you as less confident and less genuine. And in this coming future of work transition that we're going through right now, trust is going to be more important than ever. So I want these leaders to use AI in a way that maintains the trust of their teams and their clients and external stakeholders, so that they don't lose the trust at the moment at which they need it the most.
So what's, if you could give me just a little bit of the how from the book on how a senior executive, so I'm a former CEO of a about a $350 million part of the Graham Holdings family in Kaplan. So if you're talking to me, what's one of the hows that you would coach me on?
I created a framework called the AI Authenticity Loop, which helps leaders use AI in the process of communicating a message. And your listeners can download that resource at my website at allisonshapira.com/AI. And I'll give you one tool from the framework that you can use. This is an easy first step. As leaders, as executives, especially in large organizations or even small organizations, our lives are full of jargon. We use jargon without even realizing we're using it. Every organization has jargon. Every industry is full of jargon. And so when we use those words of jargon and acronyms, our words lose their power and meaning. So a very easy first step you can take with an AI tool, whether you're using Gemini or Claude or Copilot or ChatGPT, is to take a message that you need to communicate, put it into that AI tool, and ask it to identify the jargon. And AI becomes a mirror that shows you how you're coming across, so you can then evaluate it and ask yourself, is this how I want to come across? Do I want to use the phrase synergy or the word synergy when reaching out to someone? Or is that going to sound trite or like a platitude? So that's one of the ways in which I recommend you use AI to bring out your authenticity, because it helps you remove the layers you're wearing that aren't yours, that you don't even realize you have on.
Yeah, I laughed so heartily because one of the cultural barriers to entry in many of the companies that I've been involved in are the TLAs, the three-letter acronyms, right? And somebody could have been with the company for a year or more, and they're still sitting in a meeting, scratching their head, unwilling to raise their hand and say, "Can you clarify what that three-letter acronym?" And then there are the people on the inside in the know who knew all those things and kind of traded on them like some secret code that you needed to decode before you could really be one of the members on the team.
I agree with you. And it's rare that people will even feel comfortable asking what that TLA means, because they'll blame themselves for not knowing. They'll say, I should know what this means, but I don't. And so they'll sit in silence and they won't know what you're saying. And that holds them back from taking action. So it creates friction, and it creates a feeling of psychological, or a lack of psychological safety, which can hold back your organization. So I really relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe TLAs and abbreviations are necessary in a military context, but your business is not the military, and you don't need
Usually not.
Usually not. You don't need to put that extra layer of unapproachability in there. So I like to do these mentorship moments before we cut to a quick break. You have a senior leader sitting in front of you right now who believes they can say something once and everybody's going to get it. Spoiler alert, I used to be that guy. This leader then routinely scratches their heads when teams misinterpret the message. What's your advice to this individual who believes they can say something once and everybody's going to get it? What's the most important thing that they can do right now to improve their ability to communicate effectively?
Sometimes it's so obvious in our head what we want someone to do or know, and yet it is not obvious to the other people we're speaking to. And I'll never forget, a couple of years ago, I was in a groove. It was a Monday morning, and I asked two people on my team over chat to get me a document because I was in a groove and I wanted to keep going. And both of them went off for half an hour individually, found something. Each one sent me something different, and neither one got me what I actually had asked for. And I realized I wasted both of their time, precious morning time on a Monday morning. And it reinforced for me the power of clarity. And so what I would say to that senior leader is to say out loud what it is you're looking for and listen back to ask yourself, is this clear? And AI is great at this, because you can put in a request into AI and you'll see very clearly, or you will see very quickly how clear your request is, because you'll usually have to say, no, that's not what I meant. No, do it this way. Do it that way. And it takes you a couple of prompts to micromanage the AI to get you what you want. Well, instead of micromanaging your team, how about starting with clarity to begin with, recognizing that it's respecting your time and it's respecting your team's time.
That's excellent. Well, we're going to take a really short break, Allison, and we'll be right back and talk more about corporate communication. Want to understand money, markets, and the economy to make better financial decisions? I'm Andy Temte. Join me every Saturday morning for Money Lessons with Andrew Temte on YouTube or your favorite podcast streaming service. And we're back with Allison Shapira talking about all things communication. So, Allison, let's do a little success story analysis. Take us inside one of your most compelling success stories in working with leadership teams to improve their communication strategies. And what was the primary ingredient to success?
One of my favorite programs that I offer is this intensive executive leadership cohort that we offer for usually new senior leaders or new teams working together. And it's this intensive program over 2 days in person and a follow-up one-on-one with each person. And one of my favorite success stories from a particular program like that we ran for a Fortune 50 financial institution came from the feedback we received from the senior leader of that institution who put her team through that program. And what she said to me was, I can tell who has gone through your program and who hasn't by the way in which they ask questions at our events. And what I loved about that feedback, that compliment, is that it's not just about what to say. It's about the strategy with which you listen to others and then are able to ask thoughtful questions. Because in my experience teaching public speaking, in order to be effective leaders, we also have to be effective listeners as well. So it underscores the balance that we need to prepare to speak. But in order to prepare to speak effectively, we first have to listen to the people we're going to speak to, as opposed to just show up and present a solution without having done the listening work beforehand, which means our solution isn't going to be as effective. So that's why I see that as one of my biggest success stories, because it demonstrated the nuance of leadership communication as being more than just what you say, but the intentional listening process that goes into preparing what you're going to say so that it lands with your audience.
Yeah. And in the age of computers, I think at ever increasing cognitive levels, the future facing skill is really the art of the question, how to ask great questions. So the fact that your program is not only creating better public speakers, but more aware folks who can ask great questions, that's a huge thumbs up. Allison, now take us into an engagement without naming any names, but that didn't go so well. And what was the main reason why the engagement went sideways?
As I'm sure you know, in order to be an effective student of any topic, whether you're studying geopolitics or communication or accounting, there has to be the will to learn, the will to try something new. And so in the rare instances when an engagement didn't go well, it was because I was working with people who just didn't care about what they were doing. And I'll never forget, and it's not actually an example of an engagement that didn't go well, but it was an example of someone who came to me because he thought he was a boring public speaker. And what we realized is that he was just bored. And if you're bored with what you're talking about, you're going to be a boring speaker. And so what this executive wound up doing is quitting his job and starting a nonprofit to revitalize an abandoned building, which is what he was really passionate about. And once he started talking about that new initiative, all of a sudden, his body, his voice, his soul was animated because he truly cared about what he was saying. So when engagements don't go well, it's when people either don't like their work environment or are in an unsafe work environment, like a psychologically unsafe environment, or are just there to, metaphorically punch in and punch out at the end of the day. And that's when I find engagements are less satisfying, because I'm not working with someone who's truly committed to learning. They're just forced to be there.
Yeah. Reason number 4,332 of why aligning one's personal purpose with the work that you're doing is so incredibly important. 'Cause you could come across as boring because you're bored. That is really great advice. Allison, what have we not talked about from your first or your second book uh, that you want to make sure that listeners come away with today?
I want listeners to understand that even though we use the phrase public speaking, I define it as something that happens every day. In fact, my definition of public speaking is anytime you speak with one person or more, with some purpose or goal. So the type of skill sets that I teach, that I study, that I foster in others is not just about when you're standing on stage delivering a TED Talk or speaking at an all hands meeting. It happens in a one-on-one conversation with a colleague, with your senior leader, with a spouse or someone in your community. And it happens every day. And I like to define communication as leading with your voice, using your voice on behalf of yourself and others in a way that builds trust and connection. And now, how do you use generative AI in service of that message, in service of the people you seek to lead without losing trust and connection?
Excellent. Well, Allison, we're both musicians. I've got a question for you. I'm an old classic rock and roller, 70s and 80s rock. You come from the world of opera. My musical journey was extraordinarily beneficial to my career as a finance educator, CEO. How has your experience in opera helped you in your career? You gave us a glimpse at the top of the show, but take us a little bit deeper.
My experience training to be an opera singer was hugely helpful to building a career as a public speaker and as an executive advisor on communication skills. First and foremost, because I've built years of experience in stage presence. How do you sit or stand on stage? How do you carry yourself? How do you make others feel? And so learning about stage presence taught me about executive presence. And that's what I help build in the people I serve, whether I'm delivering a keynote and embodying these skill sets, or I'm working one-on-one with an executive, helping them build these skill sets. I also learned the power of breathing and breath support to project my voice and make sure I'm speaking with the full weight of my words. And that's something not a lot of people learn unless they've trained as actors or as musicians. So there's so much that I learned from opera that helps me in this career. But I will say, Andy, what I learned as a performing folk musician was actually even more beneficial because opera singers are expected to be perfect. We're trained to be
Right.
perfect, whereas
Right.
folk musicians are not expected to be perfect. We are authentic. We're expected to be our authentic selves. And so when I advise leaders, I'm teaching them it's not about being perfect. It's about being authentic, even if it means you have a few filler words or you forget where you are in your message. The audience will forgive you if you make a few mistakes. It doesn't mean you won't be prepared. They expect accuracy and preparation, but they're craving authenticity over perfection, which is why folk music has been even better of a teacher
Mhm.
than opera has been.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. In the band that I lead, we take great pride in showing up, and what you're going to hear is what we're doing on stage. There's very little, if any, kind of overlaying tracks or anything like that. We are very authentic. So. Anyway, let's have a little fun with some lightning round questions to close things out, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. So, Allison Shapira, you've just won a $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a general cause. Who do you pick?
I pick an organization devoted to Alzheimer's research because one of my grandmothers passed away from Alzheimer's, and I know how destructive it is for so many families. So that's the cause that I would give $50 million to support.
That is awesome. We share that struggle.
I'm sorry.
Allison, if I gave you access to a really little time machine and you can send a message to an earlier version of yourself, what's the message and what previous version do you send it to?
I would tell myself, my earlier self, to trust my gut and trust my instinct. And I'd probably go back about, let's see, to around 2007 and send that message to myself to trust my instincts and learn how to say no when in my heart of hearts, I know that no is the right answer.
Well, Allison, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
I'm focused on being more present wherever I am. As I'm sure you can relate to, it's always in my head what I have to do next. I'm always thinking about what's on my to-do list. I have a whole whiteboard here that has ideas and notes on it. And so at any given moment, I'm thinking about 3 months ahead and I'm living about 3 months ahead. And I often have to remind myself to pause and breathe, which is what I teach my clients, ironically, and be physically, emotionally, and intellectually present wherever I am. That is really hard, especially for someone whose mind moves a mile a minute, which I love, but can be destructive to personal or professional relationships and even destructive to enjoying the moment that I'm in. So being present is what I am actively working on.
Isn't it wonderful being a teacher and an educator? Because I routinely find myself grappling with the same things that I'm helping others to understand, and a lot of people don't get that about educators, that natural tension that we go through every day. So thank you for sharing that. And where can folks get a hold of you if they so desire?
There are two ways folks can reach me. I love to connect on LinkedIn, so I encourage people to connect with me through my LinkedIn account, and they can ask me questions there and follow what I'm posting about. And secondly, to get a resource guide for my new book, AI for the Authentic Leader, please visit my website at allisonshapira.com/AI.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your contributions to our listeners today.
My pleasure, Andy. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, your family, your neighbors, and maybe a few colleagues at work. The show was produced by Nicholas Temte, and we'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.